every sport, though, when you boil it down, even though you need a certain number of people on the field or you're all by yourself, there is an element of a team. So in basketball, and an element of individual performance. And in basketball, clearly you see the team on the court. But when every moment you're leading, every moment you're playing, you're making an impact on the court.
Here we are again for another episode of The Practical Optimist. This is the place where we explore the intersection of leadership and life. Thanks so much for being with us today. I'm your host, Ken Schmidt, CEO and founder of Turning Point Executive Search and author of The Practical Optimist, an entrepreneur's journey through life's turning points. As a quick reminder, please subscribe on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And by all means, tell your friends all about us. Today's guest is one of my favorite people, Sharon Spooler. She's the managing director at Chief Outsiders. She's based here in San Diego. And during our chat today, we'll touch on a number of real-world ideas, including the 4 S's of business and college, non-traditional career paths, how playing sports prepares you for business and leadership, and the importance of taking enough risk to give yourself a true opportunity to follow your passion. So sit back and enjoy my discussion with Sharon Spooler about the intersection of leadership and life. I'm very excited that today we have one of my good friends as well as a local San Diego leader here, Sharon Spooler, who is the managing partner over at Chief Outsiders, a company based out of Texas. And Sharon handles all of the Midwest region for the company. So thank you for joining us and welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Ken, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and part of your podcast adventure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, as we've been talking about, it's a learn as you go kind of experience, but we're super excited about it as the book comes out. And as we talk to more and more leaders like yourself, I think it's going to be a really great way to share a lot of kind of expertise, but also kind of life's lessons along the way with each person. So thanks for being willing to share.
Yeah, and thanks for amplifying a topic I love a lot, which is leadership. I'm excited to chat with you about that today.
Yeah, exactly. And I know every time you and I have a conversation, off mic and off camera, we talk and talk and talk, and there's so many different things that are parallel between our lives. Both of us had, dads that are incredible mentors for us. Strong, tight families as well. We both have kids that have gone through sports and different activities. And so it's been a lot of fun talking about that. So I thought today we'd kind of start with, really, kind of your kind of background, if you will, your upbringing. I know that obviously you've been in San Diego here for quite a while, but that you grew up in Central California. So maybe you can share a little bit with our listeners about, what it is that kind of helped shape you growing up in Fresno, California.
Great. Thanks, Ken. I don't often publicize Fresno, California, but that is from where I hail, at least in the latter part of my childhood. I grew up in a military family, but we settled there during elementary school. And it was my mom, my dad, and I, small family. My dad, as I said, was military. And afterwards, he took some time to figure out what his next career would be. And that got us to Fresno, California.
That's great. There's a lot to be said about growing up in a small town as well, where you have a chance to really know your neighbors. Obviously, you have small schools. Everybody kind of knows each other around the neighborhood as well. But also, I think it helps. Kind of from a bit of a humbling background when you do get a chance to move to a bigger city and get a sense for what the differences are, right? And there's pros and cons of both areas. And I know growing up, you played sports, and then you decided to go off to Princeton. So I would imagine that was a pretty big eye-opening experience going from Fresno to out to Princeton on the East Coast.
Yeah, I think humbling in many ways. I guess that's the word. I think growing up in Fresno, things were military families. Neither of my parents had gone to college. My dad, in fact, didn't graduate high school the traditional way. He eventually had his GED and went back as an adult learner to get his AA degree in business when I was a young girl. So growing up in that type of environment, things were tight, things were tough, and we made do. And through really a great school system, I went to a high school called Globus West, and they're well known for their sports. In fact, I just saw last night that they're ranked number 5 in the state of California in girls basketball, this year. So they have quite a tradition. And
that's amazing.
And I played basketball for them and came home one night from a college night and announced to my parents that the school I liked best at college night was Princeton. And I think their response was, "You do know that's in the Ivy League, don't you?" And I said, "What's the Ivy League?" And and sure enough, set my sights on that type of school, and was able to get there through basketball was a great channel, but also just hard work and some of the values that were instilled in me as a child. So and fortunate enough that my parents were able to to send me there.
That's great. So, I mean, a lot of times you hear about, depending upon where you grow up and the kind of school you went to, but also a lot depends upon the teachers that you had in high school and even the school counselor, right? I know as you and I have talked about in the past, my dad, went to high school and finished early and was told by the powers that be that, hey, you should become an architect because you're really good at math. And so he got a full ride scholarship to Pratt in New York and realized halfway through, this is not what he wanted to be. We're not his people, if you will. And business and the restaurant industry was his calling. So I'm curious, from your experience, did you have one or two teachers or a school counselor or a guidance counselor that helped you figure out the path to get to Princeton?
I did. We had a great school principal who was connected with admissions officers and different colleges and understood what it took to get there. I think the admissions officer at Stanford had recently moved to Princeton, and we had sent students from my high school to Stanford. And so I think he helped mentor me. In fact, my high school basketball coach was my school counselor. So there was a natural relationship there. And my dad was a big mentor along the way, even though he hadn't chosen or had the opportunity to choose a path through college. He really enforced the importance of academics early. And unlike most women, and maybe in my generation, hopefully that's changing, STEM was highly encouraged in my household. Doing math in my head, doing math at every opportunity was kind of a family thing, right? Who could add up the bill quickest? Who could guess the dinner bill with tax or the grocery bill with tax?
We did the same thing. I remember my sister and I used to always fight over who got to figure out the tax, but also calculate the tip. Before we had smartphones and calculators in our pocket, right? But that was a great way to learn math and figure things out. Yeah,
that's right. And I had some really great early math teachers as well, and I think they really set the path toward looking at careers in STEM. And ultimately, when I went to Princeton, I'd selected to major in mechanical engineering, but some upper level courses like differential equations and thermodynamics got the best of me. So I looked for a way to sort of do a little bit more applied math, and that's essentially where I ended up, was in a degree that blends sort of statistics, operations research, and economics into it. Basically, then we called it operations research. Today they call it data science. So
right, I was going to say, right.
Yeah. So basically, like how to really take data and use it to solve problems, break down problems into smaller parts and find the answer. And that's where I landed. And I think a lot of it is due to that mentorship early from those teachers and from my dad, that, math isn't scary and you can do it. And, perhaps that's even a career if you go down that path.
Right, exactly. And I think you had shared with me previously that your dad ended up getting into the insurance industry and kind of built a clientele, a really, really strong reputation among military families. So you were kind of exposed to, kind of what a salesperson, for lack of a better term, was all about. Did you ever think you would find yourself here, a number of years later in a role where you're kind of selling, if you will, selling marketing services and CMOs?
Well, I think if you asked my dad, he probably would have said the two things he tried to teach me was that math is good and sales is good.
That's great. I love that.
So, he, and I learned, I think, from a marketing side, the importance of understanding your market, because again, he didn't have formal training, and he was able to build quite a successful career in the insurance business, selling to the market he knew best, which was military personnel. Yeah. And ended up running the international sales team for a large insurance company, maybe 10 years after he started as an agent himself.
Interesting.
And so I think if you asked him, he would probably smile and say, yes, it was all in the plan. So
right, exactly. Well, I know you and I both, had similar experiences in terms of, working our way through college and and having that be a focus. And for me, I didn't play sports. I know that you did, obviously, but having to balance those things. And I was an econ major, so relatively rigorous courses, but working, part-time or almost kind of, I guess, half-time those days, right, along with the classes. And I know that you had started off playing basketball and also working and trying to get all of your engineering classes, completed and go through that. And then about halfway through, you kind of shifted which sport you were part of. Maybe you can share a little bit about that decision.
Yeah. Well, if I had something to tell my kids now, I would tell them to consider the 4 S's when they go off to college. And those are, right, those are studies, social, sleep, and sports. And it's very hard to balance all 4 of those.
Especially the sleep part, yes.
Exactly. Think about the the parts of the 4 S's that matter most to you and sort of how you look at your college experience, right?
I love that.
Yeah, because the Ivy League does not offer scholarships, athletic scholarships, I was work study all 4 years. And, we also graduate people in 4 years with engineering degrees at Princeton. So, and it's hard to you don't take AP credit to Princeton either. So you have to take the number of credits or courses that are required. You need to do it in 4 years. And we're not going to give you, sort of athletic scholarship support. So I didn't really think that equation through when I thought about the 4 S's. And that's true. In my junior year, I needed to kind of make a decision about what was most important. And so at the time, basketball did not look like something I would do beyond college. It was a wonderful hobby. I still love it. And I love being part of my daughter's program today. And I decided that probably the best path was to focus on my studies. And so I left the basketball team after a couple of years. And about 3 weeks later, I landed myself, my roommate was on the track team, and I landed myself at a track practice and showed up in my basketball wear. And they said, "What kind of track person is that?" And for anyone who knows me, you would immediately know I was not a sprinter or a long distance runner, and probably not a jumper. So it left one set of events, which were the throws. And I ended up throwing the hammer and the javelin on the track team for the final kind of year and a half of my college experience.
Wow. What a shift. Going from basketball to throwing a hammer. Yeah.
Well, I missed the camaraderie. I missed the team element. I missed just the having a physical outlet, I think, at the end of the day.
Sure.
And it was a much more manageable schedule for me at the time. So things worked out. It was a great experience. And I love that I have now 2 sets of former teammates as friends.
Right.
So,
exactly. That's great.
It's great.
Well, and I think, when I think of basketball, obviously I think of it being probably one of the, biggest team sports, if you will, right? It's got to be a team effort, if you will, to be effective. When I think of, throwing a javelin or a hammer, obviously I'm very naive about that in terms of a sport, but I think of it being a very, very, individualistic, sport, if you will, or event where you're not relying on a team. But is that true? Did you have to kind of shift gears from being in a team oriented mindset to now, okay, this is me and the hammer and that's it?
That was best of both worlds, because with track, we could do our workouts for the most part when we needed to. So she'd put them on a board and I'd show up and do the training that was assigned me. And then I'd have certain short periods of time during the week I needed to be with the coach at a certain time throwing my implement. But in basketball, you need all 12 or 13 people there to practice. Right. And so it was much more structured in terms of when and how it fit into my day. We would leave for long weekend travels, several times during the season. And in track, we had 1-day meets where we could leave early in the morning and come back that night. Right. So it was a different kind of time commitment, but both required time. And I think every sport, though, when you boil it down, even though you need certain number of people on the field or you're all by yourself, there is an element of a team. So in basketball and in an element of individual performance. And in basketball, clearly you see the team on the court. But when every moment you're leading, every moment you're playing, you're making an impact on the court, whether you're playing help side defense or you're setting a screen for somebody or you're communicating with your teammates what's happening on the court, you are individually chiming in to be part of the team. And so, and then sometimes you get the ball and it's your turn to shoot. And that's an individual performance in the moment. It just lasts a little bit shorter maybe than it does to walk into a ring or onto a field and throw an implement. And in track, we're all getting points for the team based on our performance. So
Yeah.
There is a little bit of a more of an individual element, but like most sports, I think they both blend, both the team and the individual
Right.
performance are part of it.
That's great. Well, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes also, because I'm curious about, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you could be describing your role right now also at Chief Outsiders, right? Where sometimes you have the ball and you're the one, with your client delivering on whatever the CMO needs are. And other times you're taking a step back and looking at the entire field, quote unquote field, to see what your client needs, and you're deploying resources elsewhere. So let's come back to that. But I want to fast forward now. So you finished up school in 94, I believe, right?
Right.
So it's, I came out of school in 92. So it was still the same recession when I graduated as what it was 2 years later for you as well. And then you found yourself taking an internship in Kentucky, right?
I did. Well,
leaving Princeton and going to Kentucky. Yeah.
The heart of basketball in Kentucky. No, and I did. I learned early you have to network, and so I used the network I had and found a role at an insurance company in Louisville, Kentucky, and I loved it. They said, "We'll try you out for a year," and the person I worked for at that time was a mentor. He what had been a partner at Bain and BCG before taking the role as head of strategic planning at that company. And so he treated me like an analyst, maybe in a consulting firm, and sent me off to learn about new products and new programs at different conferences, exposed me to so much.
Wow. At that age, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Had me go get my Series 6 and 63 and life and health licenses. And so really exposed me to the world of investing and insurance, and was a mentor to me long after. In fact, we're still in touch. And my career has collided. He has brought me into things many times. In fact, he's also responsible for landing me in San Diego back in 1999 when he was invested in a startup here in San Diego and said that they needed somebody, to sort of help them in the marketing and analytical side. So he's actually responsible for bringing me here too. So that's a mentor and someone that has had a really strong impact on my career from that first job.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the one non-S letter to add to college experience, right? Mentorship. Try to find somebody who can be a mentor for you, both in school, but also who can remain a mentor even, post-graduation.
Yeah. Or maybe we call it a support system and we continue.
Right. There you go. Keep the S's going. I love that.
I do like S's with Sharon Spooler.
Yeah, the 5 S's. I like that. That's good.
The alliteration going. That's right.
Right. We got to copyright that, the 5 S's. So did you stay with that insurance, with that company then in Kentucky until you came to San Diego in 99?
No, I stayed with them, and they were purchased by a large international insurance company, and they rolled most of their operations elsewhere. And so I had an opportunity, and I went to a bank called Signet Bank in Richmond, Virginia, which was the bank that spun off a little company called Capital One at the very beginning. And I joined Signet to help them on the lending side. And that's where the data science came in, because we were using advanced analytics and statistical modeling back then to figure out how to do certain national lending programs. So I did that for a few years, and then they were bought by First Union Bank during all of the consolidation of the banking industry in the mid to late 90s. And at that time, I went and joined First USA Bank, which became part of Chase.
So many iterations.
From there, I was headed to business school, and that's when that boss from Louisville called me and said, you should go out to San Diego for an internship at this startup that I'm invested in, and then go off to business school. And I have to confess, I got to San Diego and never went to school, never went to business school. So I think I found what I was looking for.
Sure, exactly. Well, you probably got, the education that you got, on the street, so to speak, or in that internship, usually it rivals or it's better than what you might get in business school, just in terms of the real world and seeing what's happening in real-time situations versus the theoretical classroom.
That's right. That's what I saw as well. And it worked out well, because as you know, we went through another little mini recession in 01, 02 when I probably would have come out of business school. So things kind of worked out well. And
Yeah.
And it's allowed me to make my home San Diego, which has been which is wonderful, as you know.
Well, yes, good place to be for sure, especially this
That's
time of
right.
year, especially in the in the winter time where it's what is it? I was talking to somebody last week where it was 10 or 15 degrees where they were, and I'm saying, oh yeah, we're complaining because it's all the way down to 55 here. So
That's right. That's right. That's right.
it's all relative. So
Yeah.
at this stage, then, so you're with a startup here in San Diego. It's the late 90s, right, or around 2000 now. And at this point, are you starting to kind of get exposed to, or feel like, hey, marketing might be something that I have some interest, or even some, the right mindset for, the right, kind of perspective and interest in?
Right. Yes. I think so. The roles I was in were often called marketing analyst, business analyst,
Mm-hmm.
marketing analysis, business intelligence. It was really the early intersection of data analytics and marketing. That's what I came up through. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the analytics and the math was really for the sake of growing the company. So we're doing all this math to figure out how to grow, and growth is, usually a primary a primary KPI of
Mm-hmm.
marketing folks. So
Right.
so it was adjacent to marketing and even called marketing in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
cases early on, and it was just the real mathematical side of it. And I really did that until um, for another 5 or 6 years
Mm-hmm.
until I jumped over to the B2B, to the technology side of things in my career.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny
Yeah.
how, I'm being a recruiter for 25 years, there are certainly some people that have more linear type, careers, if you will, kind of career journeys. They're a CPA or they're an attorney or what have you. And it's pretty consistent in terms of that track. But then you have folks like you and like myself, where it's, certainly not a straight line. It's a lot of ups and downs, and the overall trend line is up, but it's not like every year is perfect or the next step up. So at what point did you begin to either be tasked with loosely supervising people, or really kind of on a more formal basis begin to manage a team?
All the way back in '97, when I was at
Okay.
First USA Bank, I managed. It was my first leadership role. I had mentored new employees prior to that, but I've been leading a team for the bulk of my career.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is that something that you kind of naturally gravitated towards, or does somebody have to push you into it and say you're the kind of person that people will look up to, that they'll follow? You should think about this, and you resisted, or did you jump right in?
Well, that's a journey in and of itself, right? There's so many. I love in my coaching and mentoring work. I love working with people who are discovering themselves as a leader in an organization, because it's such a journey. And I'll say, like, in most companies, I was probably promoted because I was technically good at something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know that as leaders, we've always prioritized the soft skills as much as we might need to. And so I'll have to confess, those early roles, I was very bumpy, I'm sure. I
Sure.
mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
was all
Join
about
join the club.
technical,
You're not alone.
right? It was all about technical know-how. And the journey you go on as a leader to figure out that really your role is to open up doors, to remove barriers, to unlock what someone is great at and find ways for them to do that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The intersection of what they love, what they're good at, and what we need to pay them to do is where you want to help people find the bullseye. But it took me so many years to figure that out. And I think, that's where for me, I decided to go and get a certification in coaching and in
Mm-hmm.
leadership development, because I knew that those soft skills were something I wanted to develop further. And
Right.
so while I had played sports and while I had been in leadership roles in my life, there's still so much to learn, and it's still a journey even after all these years of what is it now, probably 25 years of leading
Right.
teams, and it's still a
Exactly.
journey where you go, whoa, I really stepped in it there, or hey, that seemed to have the impact I wanted it to. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
funny,
work in
and
progress. Yeah.
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, in my personal, career experience, for me, I've noticed and I've kind of observed that the people that really, definitively seek out leadership, like my goal is to be a CEO, or my goal is to be whatever it is, right, in a leadership role, they tend to not be as effective, at least in my experience, versus those that are really kind of, they step into it, but they're more of a natural leader, right? And people start to come to them even before they have a formal direct reporting relationship, but they start to come to you and say, hey, what do you think about this, Sharon? How do you handle this? I saw you did this in this situation, help me figure this out. And those folks that naturally, or that eventually and naturally kind of evolve into a leadership role, again, and for me, those are the ones that have been my best mentors over the years I've been working as well.
Yeah, I think my dad told me once that leadership isn't taken, it's given. Right? We can't,
yeah.
It's a very top-down feeling when it's taken, but when it's given, it's bi-directional. And I really believe that leadership, I strive to be the person that's just there to unlock the potential of the team, to help people realize how they want to proceed in their career, what they do best, and how to do that most of the time. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and so speaking of leadership, but leadership in life, not just career. So by this time, then you had at least one, if not both of your kids, right? You have two kids that are.
I have twins. They were born in 2009.
Right.
They're my recession babies, and they're now teenagers. And so yes, that's when they joined the party.
They joined the world, exactly right. They started to develop their own 5 S's. Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, how did you maintain the balance? Obviously you love what you do. When I hear you talk about your career, it's obvious that you have a passion for it and you're very good at it. But how did you maintain that balance between now being a mother, but also having this career and being a great leader as well?
I don't know if any of us knows the answer to that.
That's true.
That's a podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, you kind of fake it till you make it, right? As a parent, that's for sure.
I mean,
especially with twins, especially.
Yeah, I think it's about you figure out what's needed in the moment and you figure out how to do that thing. And I read an article once, I think Harvard Business Review, and maybe that's where it was. And it said, women can have it all. You just might not have it all at the same time.
That's great.
And I was like, wow, that really resonates, because
that says a lot.
We somehow think that balance means we're doing all of it as much as we can and perfectly.
Right. No,
I think that's a really unrealistic bar to try to reach.
It's unfair expectation. Yeah, right.
So there are times in your career you take a step back a little bit, or you take a role that is that's more conducive to the home life you want to have, or that just there. And you think before you have children, oh, this is how it will be, and then you get there and you realize maybe that's not how it will be,
right?
And this is what it needs to be. Yeah. I think one of the things that was attractive about Chief Outsiders was the flexibility, because I don't really have Chief Outsiders. We don't really have a 9 to 5.
Right.
Where we have a whatever to whatever based on what clients
whatever's
need.
needed.
Yeah, and because we're consultants in a lot of these firms, we operate as if we're employees. We think of ourselves as part of the firm that we're working with, but we're not usually there 40 hours a week. It does happen. Sure. And because of that, we seem to have flexibility. So it has allowed me, and I've been doing this since my twins were 5. It does allow for moving things around to accommodate doctor's appointments or games, sports, or travel schedules, or what have you. And it might mean we flick the computer back on at night or on the weekend to get some things done if we ended up trading out something during the week. So it actually, probably what I'd say now that I actually think about the question is, I think I chose a path, at least for the last 7 or 8 years, that has lent itself to the flexibility that was important in my situation.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think, obviously you had proven yourself over the years where you could call your own shots to a certain extent. Right. And you had that ability to look at it and see it from both sides and say, hey, I don't want to be 100% just career or 100%, family. I want to have that balance, or the attempt at that balance, the ebb and flow, if you will. And I think back for my company too, right? So I started Turning Point 15 years ago when my kids were, very, very young at the time as well. And I decided in the beginning to not get an office for that same reason that you're talking about. I wanted the flexibility to be at home. Right. My wife is a marriage and family therapist, and so she was working full time as well. So the ability for for me to take care, she would take care of the kids in the morning, then I would be able to pick them up from school, do homework, make dinner, those kinds of things. If I had to go to an office 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, that would have been really difficult to do that, right? And so that focus or that commitment to the flexibility piece, drove us to decide to not pick up an office, not get an office early on. And then 15 years later, we still don't have an office. And now it's one of the things that has allowed me to attract such great people to the team, because they also want that flexibility. They don't want to have to suit up and go to a physical office space every day just for the sake of being there. They like flexibility of working from home also. So yeah, so I think for me, it's kind of similar where that flexibility and that family emphasis, if you will, kind of took a front seat at that point in my life. But it ended up really, positively impacting my professional life as well, long term.
Absolutely.
You just never know how it's gonna, kind of be intertwined at different points.
Yeah, I really applaud companies that are, that are allowing people to sort of have the quote unquote balance that they need.
Right.
Whether it's allowing for work share or part-time or flexible, hybrid, in the office, work from home. Yeah. I think that has really been a nice trend. I won't say it was like that when I started. And, in the last 5 to 10 years, certainly, propelled along by COVID, we've come a long way on that front and allowing families, men and women, to find what works for their family dynamic. So I really applaud companies.
Yeah, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the types of clients that you work with now at Chief Outsiders. But I'm curious, do your Chief Outsider clients expect your CMOs to be deployed and be physically on site, or do you have to kind of convince them of that model, if you will?
Well, it really varies based on the culture of the company that we come into. I mean, we aren't there to change the culture. We're there to be part of the culture, part of the team, and make big things happen. And so in order to do that, in order to be effective, it can sometimes require client travel. I've certainly had clients that have wanted me there every week or at least once a month or every other week, and some that I never met in person. So
interesting.
And I've probably worked with, 25 or so, 30, somewhere in there, companies over the 7 or 8 years I've been doing this. So it's really been a range. And I think, again, I think it's reflective of what we're seeing in the overall market, where earlier on it was more face-to-face, and now people are more comfortable with hybrid or remote. And that's what's great about what we do, because our CMOs get to sort of define what they need. And some are willing and able and excited about going on site, and some prefer client engagements that are remote. And so when we're, as managing partners, fitting the right person to the role, we do consider that. And we ask the CEOs that are bringing us in, what's important to them? Is it important to your culture that people are face to face? And so we do encourage our CMOs to get out there, at least once a quarter to sort of build relationships, but it's not required. And I think it is based on all of it goes back to the culture of the companies with whom we're working.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And having been out there for 7 years, you saw, kind of the demand, the needs, the trends, if you will, among marketing leaders pre-COVID and what was required of them. And then here we are now. I don't know if we can say post-COVID. I think we're never going to be post-COVID, really. But the worst part of it is gone, hopefully.
Yeah.
But so I'm curious, have you seen a change in terms of the type of engagements that your CMOs are on, and kind of what's expected of them, and what clients want from them now versus what it was like, let's say pre-COVID?
Yeah, I'd almost want to turn that question back to you, Ken, because you're talking to companies all the time.
Sure.
I mean, from my perspective, I'd say that that there's certainly more awareness of the availability of world-class talent on demand for an interim role, for a fractional role to bolster a team. Maybe the head of marketing a company has at one point isn't who they need 12 or 18 months later, and they need a skill set to augment what they have or to change the direction of where they're going. but I do think that there's more awareness of the type of services that we provide now than certainly there was 7 years ago.
Sure.
And then in terms of the skill sets, I think what COVID accelerated, in my opinion, were two things. One is the importance of messaging and positioning your business, because, if you weren't saying something about pandemic response in many industries, especially things like healthcare, for example, during the pandemic, you look blind and it looked stale.
You're kind of tone deaf. Yeah, right.
Right? It looked tone deaf. Exactly.
Yeah.
And now if you're still saying something about the pandemic is upon us, it seems like it's stale and tone deaf.
Move
right?
on with your life. Yes.
We have fatigue now. We have fatigue. So I think messaging and the need to continually iterate and think about your value proposition and how you present, that has highlighted the need for that. And the other one is certainly digital, because when face-to-face ended, if companies did not have any kind of digital presence for prospects or interested parties, be them consumers or other businesses, to raise their hand and say, I want to talk to you about your services, they were really left behind.
Right. Yeah.
And they needed to be able to find you too. And it wasn't going to be an event. It wasn't going to be, out playing golf or a networking meeting. It needed to be, something on a website and and some digital marketing that went along with it. So I think the demand for digital transformation, I hate to use that overused term as well, but digital marketing, digital chops has increased also in the last 7 years, especially recognizing now that consumers don't just buy face to face.
Exactly. No, I agree 100%. Yeah, I would echo all the things that you said as well. And I think, when events went away, and obviously in early 2020, all the companies that have relied so much on those events or sponsorships or trade shows for lead generation, that all dried up, right? And they had to change things completely. And even the folks that were on the sales side that were used to the schmoozing and they'll take you to dinner, let's go golfing, here's a free trip, whatever it is, that also went away. So then it came down to, selling and relationships 101. That's what it always should have been, but it really took this, global pandemic to remind the sellers and the buyers that's what it's all about. It's about the relationship, right? And I think, one of the, I don't, and maybe I just missed it, but I don't remember any pre-2019 searches or openings that were around, kind of sales or customer success, right? Or sales enablement. It maybe here and there with some really large companies, but I think, now post-COVID, there are it's so much more important to make sure that customers actually adopt whatever service or software or platform that they're, supposedly buying, but also that there's somebody in the organization selling those services that's kind of a liaison between product development and marketing and sales and even IT to a certain aspect, to make sure that what the customers need or challenges that they're having are being communicated back to the right people. And so it's all working more hand in hand versus, that's your role. You stay over there in your silo and you stay in your silo. Now I think it's much more engaging and much more of a circular relationship versus linear.
That's right. Yeah. I think it is. It's a collaborative effort now between product sales and marketing, in most organizations. And I think that there are, there's a lot of studies over time about the role and how the three of those legs of the stool, if you will, need to be working in tandem. And I think that it's never been more important to be able to cut through the noise and explain what you do and how you help companies.
Exactly.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, in terms, again, so back to the deployment, kind of the team sport versus the individual, right? So how do you decide on a given day, and maybe it's decided for you based on the scheduling, what's going on, but on a given day, are you finding yourself having to wear multiple hats where now you're sitting as the CMO, the fractional CMO for company ABC, and you're in more of a tactical kind of a capacity, and then later on that day, you're having to take a step back and figure out, okay, I have these 3 new prospect clients, which CMO in my stable of leaders that I have should I deploy for each one? How do you maintain that balance today between the team sport and the individual sport, so to speak?
That's right. That's a great question. Well, I think as the demands, of leadership and of leading this Midwest team have increased, I think that my client work has unfortunately been something I've had to let go of a little bit. So I think that's part of that journey. I think that it's all about what's best for, I call it highest and best use all the time. So what's
Great.
needed, right? That's the touching base with the field or the system or the company, like what's needed in the system right now in order to sort of, achieve our goals, whatever those might be. And then connecting with that, and from that saying, what's needed from me? What's the role I can best play, given what's happening, and using a basketball analogy, what's happening on the court? Where do I need to be? Am I defending the rim? Am I setting a screen? Am I blocking out? Am I rebounding? Like what, and what am I best at? I'm probably not going to be best at guarding the point guard, in my 6'2" stature. But maybe when that point guard gets by, I can be there to help. And it's the same thing when you look at, your work schedule, which is, where am I needed now? And also raising twins, frankly, both of them are crying. It's eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But, I loved you more last time, so I'll love this one more the next time.
I got to trade off the love today.
Right. It's all about like what's needed most in the field, what's needed most, and how do I apply my strengths in that area, to help the team move forward. So that's my responsibility for helping the team, and what does the team need from me? So them calling my individual efforts forth, and my proactive look at the team and figuring out where I think I could be used most. So
yeah, sure, exactly. Well, it's funny. I mean, you're talking about, raising twins as well. I remember when my sister and I are 4.5 years apart in age, and growing up, my dad was a Jack in the Box franchisee and my mom was in real estate. So a very entrepreneurial household and kind of dynamic. But I can remember very distinctly about them sharing with us what was going on in their respective businesses, the good and the bad. Right, things that were going well, and then when somebody embezzled money from my dad, and someone stole payroll, and someone did this, or my mom had a crazy client on the real estate side that was just going kind of bonkers. So just absorbing all that, and it's not like they sat down and said, okay, this is a lesson we are now going to teach you about blah blah blah, right? Because that we wouldn't have listened then. But it was just in the normal course of our conversations at dinner or vacations or whatever, that I kind of learned all that. And I've now deployed that myself as a leader and also as a business owner. Do you find yourself, I know it's harder these days in terms of getting everybody together for a family dinner or whatever with devices and screens and everything else, but do you find yourself doing that as well with your twins in terms of imparting on them the things that you're learning along the way?
I think so. I mean, I think it's the nature of, the kids aren't the only ones that check in at dinner with what's going on with them, right? Like everyone checks in with what's going on and what's happening in their lives. And they'll ask me, Mom, do you have a good day? What happened? And I'll share at a high level what was going on, and did you have lots of meetings, or did you do work, and what company? And they know who my clients are. They've met some of them.
That's great. Oh wow.
They did you work with the people from Phoenix, or yes, remember we met them, we were out visiting grandma. Yeah. Okay. Right. And so yeah, they are part of it. And I think that helps build that awareness early on. And talk about foreshadowing. One of my first jobs working for my dad was actually putting the productivity of his salespeople in a spreadsheet, and helping him analyze like who was on a good trend, who wasn't on a good trend, what this guy made in commission this month. And, and putting it in the spreadsheet was my first job. My second job was to go to him with the insights. I'd say, wow, this guy had a great month, Dad. And you'd thanks, daughter, and right. And he, and I could hear him on the phone later, like, well, my daughter's report said you had a good month, and it just gave me such a sense of being part of it and what it meant to contribute,
right.
In his business.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you and I think are fortunate that we both had, parents that were entrepreneurial, that shared that information, the good and the bad. I mean, like I said, there were very difficult times also, and we've shared the difficult times with our kids as well. So I think they appreciate, what they have. I think they understand that it's not just a straight line up, that there are ups and downs. And as a business owner, you have great years, and then you have some years where you're like, okay, Dad's the last one to get paid, and maybe Dad doesn't get paid at all. right? And everybody else gets paid. And that's why you have
That's
a
right.
savings account for,
That's
for
right.
emergencies, or a line of credit, or whatever that
That's
safety
right.
net happens to be for you. Because it's not all, overnight successes like you read about in the media out there, for sure.
That's right. Well, I think what's really important in this is I have a philosophy about leadership that you don't just lead from the front. And it helps my kids understand they can lead from the side, they can lead from the back, right? And the best example I can give is if all of us have probably seen it when we're in a meeting, a large meeting room, and someone's at the head of the table or whatever up at the whiteboard, and they're working through something with the group, and somebody picks up their device and starts to text or email or whatever,
Right.
and clearly checks out of the room. That's leading from the field, that's leading from the sides.
Right.
And because it gives everyone else in the room permission to do the same thing. And so I'm a big believer in you can also be supportive from the room by asking that great question, or by enhancing what the person just said that's up at the whiteboard. And so there's many faces of leadership beyond just the traditional one we think of as being in the front of the room. And I think by bringing these things out at the dinner table, or these lessons, kids learn how they can have an impact and how they can lead from even their space that they're in now.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. And being aware of the fact that, how you show up, whether you're an intern, whether you're the CEO, or anything in between, how you show up is being noticed. And it's people around you are looking at you as a model, right? Or as an example, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what can I get away with, what's going to be, where will I be called out on the carpet? And so that tone is being set, whether you realize it or not, by how you're showing up for anything like that. I'm curious about, as we have the last couple of minutes here, are there any, like, for example, you talked about the decision to not go to B school and instead to take on that role with the startup company here in San Diego. Are there any decisions like that where you think, gosh, I wonder how things could have been different, or maybe would have been different, that you consider, or a decision that you think, I went this direction, I probably should have gone a different direction, and so you kind of wish you had a second chance at that decision?
Well, I'm an avid consumer of the Freakonomics podcast. And so I think that if behavioral economics had actually been something that I knew about in college, it's probably where I would have ended up.
I agree 100%. I'm always been fascinated by that. I agree.
Isn't it right? So there's some things and choices of, path that way that's sort of an interesting one, I think, because when you're 18, the world is your oyster, really. And you're at a place like Princeton. It's like, pick a path,
and you don't know what questions you're supposed to be asking at 18. I mean, how do you? Yeah, all right.
Right. Like I don't think I took a psychology class, but if I had known there was something that blended econ and psychology, I probably would have loved it. So,
right.
I think about that, or I think about, the decision to go to B school was, I don't know that I've gone back and really questioned that one. I think it is the path it is, and it turned out great, and I'm super excited. And I think, I don't know that I look back and really think there's something I would do over at this point. I think it's been a wonderful ride. I think it's certainly had its learning moments, early leadership roles, but I think it's all been, the journey is all about learning from your experience, and good or bad, and then figuring out how you're going to make a different choice, or a new choice as you move along. So that's what I hope I've been able to accomplish.
No, that's great. No, I agree. Yeah, I think when I was in my 40s, I think I questioned some decisions more because I didn't have enough lead time, or enough, hindsight, if you will, to go back on and say, I wasn't sure if I should make this decision, but now that I see what happened afterwards, I'm glad that I did. But now that I'm 52 and I have that many more years under my belt, and say, okay, yes, this happened for a reason. And yes, it was painful for a while, and it was stressful and what have you. But here I am now in my early 50s. And I think, okay, to your point, I don't think I would really change anything, because even the bad decisions that I made shaped who I am today as a leader, as a business owner, as a spouse, as a parent, all those things. And I can't really pinpoint something that I would have gone back and done differently. I feel very fortunate that I can say that. I know it's not true for everybody, but I also think that it's a result of wanting to drive my career, and hopefully, make an impact on my own career, not just wait for my career to happen to me. And that was kind of my mindset, I think, from an early age.
That's right. That's exactly right. I concur completely, which is, it is about the journey, right? There is no destination necessarily. So enjoy the ride while we're on it, and make the impact we can make, and find a way to make it all a better place.
Exactly. Hence the practical optimist name, right? Where I get that from my mom's side is the practical, and my dad's side is the optimistic, and it was a great blend. You certainly can't have all of one and not the other, otherwise you're going to wind up in a very, very tough spot in your life, or having a life where you didn't take any chances, right? And I think I've been very fortunate that it's worked out as it has.
I love how that name allows you to hold the paradox of practicality and optimism in one. That's a beautiful blend. It's a beautiful mantra or blend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been
absolutely
great. Well, thank you. I've, as always, I could talk to you for another 2 hours if we had the time, but we both have day jobs to get back to. But I really appreciate you sharing the journey along the way. Congratulations on your recent promotion as well. I'm sure the Midwest region is going to be that much better, with you as their leader. So congrats on that.
Oh, thank you, Ken. I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and be part of the Practical Optimist. And be part of your podcast series. And I'm looking forward to whenever our next conversation happens.
Great. We'll definitely do it again for sure. I appreciate that. And just for those listeners out there, we are going to be, our podcasts are going to be running every other week. So our plan is to have it run the second and fourth Mondays of each month. So at some point, if we have, more and more guests that are coming on, it may go to once every week. But for right now, in the beginning, will be every other week. So we encourage you all to listen in and send comments and ideas as well, because we love feedback. Sharon and I especially really, really appreciate the engagement with our audience, no matter what form that audience is in. So you can follow us on the website or on LinkedIn or what have you. So thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Sharon, especially for sharing all your insights.
Thanks again, Ken. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Take care.
Be well. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.